In this section of the tutorial, we will investigate how inheritance can be used to predict the likelihood of offspring having a particular trait. Let's begin with the following example. What happens if you breed a homozygous recessive cat and a heterozygous cat? I recommend using the following 7 steps for all genetics problems. Some steps may seem unnecessary right now, but they will be helpful when we get to more complex problems later. Step 1. Write out the genotype-phenotype table. This will help you keep track of which genotypes produce each phenotype. Step 2. Write out the genotype and phenotype of the couple. In this example, we are breeding a homozygous recessive cat and a heterozygous cat. So, the genotype and phenotype of the couple are, let's call Mom the heterozygote. So her genotype will be big F, small f, and her phenotype will be short fur. That makes Dad the homozygous recessive cat, so his genotype is small f, and his phenotype is long fur. Note that in this example it doesn't really matter which cat is designated as female and which as male, so I've assigned them randomly. For other genes, the sex will be more important, but we'll discuss that later. Step 3. Identify the alleles that will be present in the gametes produced by each parent. In this example, the mom, with a genotype of big F, small f, produces gametes with either the dominant capital F allele or the recessive small f allele. The dad, with a genotype of small f, produces gametes that all have the recessive small f allele. Step 4. Draw the Punnett square. The Punnett square is just a way to work out statistical probabilities in a simplified way. So to do this, first create a tic-tac-toe grid. Then fill in the gametes from one parent across the top. It doesn't matter which parent goes across the top, so we'll start with the mother's gametes. Her gametes have either the dominant capital F allele or the recessive small f allele. So we write that across the top of the Punnett square. Next, place the gametes from the other parent down the side. In this case, the father's gametes all have the recessive small f allele, so we write this on the side. Notice that we didn't use all of the squares in this column, while we did use all the squares in the top row. Sometimes we will need all of the squares and sometimes we won't. Some of the sources you look at will fill in all the columns and rows regardless. I find that a little redundant, but really either way gets you the same answer. Step 5. Fill in the Punnett square. Now keep in mind that the Punnett square is just a way to identify possibilities for the offspring. So half the mother's egg have a dominant allele, and half can have the recessive allele. So the offspring have a 50% chance of getting either one of these alleles. The father only produces sperm with a recessive allele, so the offspring will always get the small f from him. The result of this is that some offspring get the dominant allele from mom and the recessive allele from dad. These kittens will be heterozygous. Some offspring get a recessive allele from mom and a recessive allele from dad. These kittens will be homozygous recessive. Step 6. Write out the potential genotypes of the offspring and identify the likelihood of each. In this particular cross, there are 2 genotype options, heterozygous and homozygous recessive. Each offspring has a 1 out of 2, or 50% chance of getting each genotype. This is shown in the table below. And finally, step 7, write out the potential phenotypes of the offspring and identify the likelihood of each. The heterozygous kittens will have short fur. The homozygous recessive kittens will have long fur. The probability that a kitten will have short fur is 1 out of 2, or 50%, and the probability for long fur is also 1 out of 2, or 50%. So, if we breed the cats in the original question, we can expect about half of the kittens to have long fur and half to have short fur. But keep in mind that these are just statistical probabilities. It does not mean that the first kitten born will have short fur and the next one will have long fur and so on. The numbers just outline our overall chances for each genotype. Now, let's go through the process one more time with a slightly more complex scenario. This time, let's breed the same heterozygous female to a male with short fur. As before, step 1, begin with the genotype-phenotype table. Step 2, write out the genotype and phenotype of the couple. We know the phenotype of the couple, they're both short-furred cats. And we know the genotype of the female, she's heterozygous, so big F, small f. However, we don't know the genotype of the male. As a cat with short fur, he can be either capital F, or capital F, lowercase f. We need more information. For example, information about the male's parents would be helpful. If his mother had long fur, we can figure out the male's genotype. We know the genotype of the mother must be small f because she has long fur. Therefore, the male must have gotten a small f allele from his mother because she only has small f alleles to pass on. Therefore, the male must be heterozygous, big F, small f. At this point, you may want to pause the video and try to work out the problem on your own first. We are crossing two heterozygous cats. What are the possible genotypes and phenotypes of the offspring? I'll wait. Go ahead and pause the video. All right, let's see how you did. So step 3 is identify the alleles that will be present in the gametes produced by each parent. In this example, both cats are heterozygous, so both produce gametes with either the capital F or the small f allele. Step 4, draw the Punnett square. Notice that both squares in the left column are used this time. Step 5, fill in the Punnett square. Note that it doesn't matter which parent donated which allele, the capital letter is always written first in the heterozygous genotype. Step 6, write out the potential genotypes of the offspring and identify the likelihood of each. In this particular cross, there are 3 genotype options. Homozygous dominant, which has a 1 out of 4 chance. Homozygous recessive, which also has a 1 out of 4 chance. And heterozygous, which has a 2 out of 4 chance. Step 7. Write out the potential phenotypes of the offspring and identify the likelihood of each. Note that figuring out the probabilities for short fur genotypes requires adding up the probabilities for both genotypes that produce this phenotype, so both the capital F and the capital F small f. So the short fur phenotype has a probability of 3 out of 4. 1/4 plus 2/4 equals 3/4. So in this cross, about 75% of our kittens will have short fur and only about 25% will have long fur. Notice that the percentages must add up to 100%. Now answer the questions on the following slides to practice what you've learned.